Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, December 22nd. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you. On this episode, we dig into a barrage of baseball news. Eno's trip to New York for our friend Nick Pollock's wedding brought us a ton of transactions. The Padres reunited with Michael King. Willson Contreras got traded to the Red Sox. The Pirates, Astros, and Rays hooked up on a 3-team deal. And then the Rays made a trade in division, sending Shane Baz to Baltimore. And that's not even all of it. But the question everybody is here for, hey, how was the wedding? How's our buddy Nick doing?
Oh, it was great. It was great to see so many old friends. And we had a little baseball. We had 2 baseball tables at the wedding. We did a Shane Baz mini pod on the dance floor, which I'm sure his wife, Amanda, was very happy about. We enjoyed some, there was a magician that came to each of us during the cocktail hours, and some cool selfies with views of the city out there in Brooklyn. It's great to get to know. I got to know Nick's father really well, So me and him are buds now, it was a really, really good time. The part that wasn't as good was that because it was Christmas and the sort of flight was expensive, and the hotels and all this, everything was a little bit more expensive because they sort of figure if you're in New York until the 20th, you're there for Christmas. So they kind of turn all the dials up, right? So I was like, oh, it's just me. My wife's not coming. I'm going to stay in a place called the Pod Hotel in Williamsburg. And it was literally, I would say the whole room was about like 90 square feet. And basically you had to just be on the bed. There was the only place to be on the bed. And then you would swing your feet around and you'd be in the bathroom. And the biggest thing that the Discorders already know was that the toilet was in the shower. It was like appropriate for Tokyo, it felt like, but we were in Brooklyn. They could have had more space, but it was optimized to pack as many of those into the space that they had. And everything was fine until I was using the toilet and the shower dripped on me. And that just felt somehow just really gross. Also, I don't know if this is design flaw or anything, but like the toilet paper has to come out in that area. So there's just like wet toilet paper after every shower.
Yeah, these things seem preventable through better design. I realize space at a premium in many parts of the world, so you have to be creative, but the overhead situation with the shower directly above you, not ideal.
Also,
and got to keep the toilet paper dry, otherwise it's not going to really help you.
Also, think about this. I don't want to get into too much detail, but like order of operations is pretty important.
Yeah, of course. You don't even have to say it. Like, that's not, everyone's got it. Like, everybody that's trying to process what you're saying right now is thinking about all the downside scenarios accordingly. So we're just going to leave it there. We're going to leave it alone.
Let's move on.
Congrats to Nick and Amanda, though. I'm not at all surprised about the emergency Baz pod from the dance floor. That is very much a Nick sort of maneuver. Let's get to some moves. Michael King stays in San Diego. Now, on the surface, it's 3 years and $75 million, but it's got 2 opt-outs, and Michael Bauman over at Fangraphs broke it all down. It's $5 million in salary for 2026. Everything else is in a signing bonus for year 1, and then there's a $5 million buyout if he exercises either one of the opt-outs, which isn't all that important to anybody listening. Basically, if Michael King gets hurt, the $75 million is all there if he doesn't opt out. But I think the expectation is, for all parties, Michael King is going to pitch well, and Michael King is going to be a free agent this time next year and probably getting a longer deal with more guaranteed money in it. But as far as the Padres' approach goes here, this seems very on brand for the situation they're in right now, right? Money is tight. Commitments are going to be limited as the Seidler family explores a sale. But Michael King has a chance to bounce back and give them ace caliber innings that they desperately need. So I'm curious, just factoring in the injuries we saw for him in 2025, where are you at for expectations going into 2026 for Michael King, now knowing that he'll be spending that pitching half his games at Petco again?
I like him on a per inning basis, and I always have, and I know that Stuff Plus doesn't love it, but I think that he just displays enough command of that changeup and command of all of his pitches, has a really interesting arsenal, and is almost an archetype of himself. So I trust that. This deal is pretty wild, though. I guess so much of it being in the signing bonus might be, where does Michael King live, and he doesn't want to pay. He doesn't want to pay California taxes on it, so maybe that's what's going on there. But the salary is so key because if it doesn't work out, this is going to get even worse for the Padres, because they will basically have a $30 million pitcher on their roster that's hurt. So this is such a tightrope. And to further illustrate how much of a tightrope this is, the luxury tax number for a team that has said they do not want to go into the luxury tax right now is $262 million. And that means they're already in. They don't want to go to the next one, maybe. They're at 264 is the second apron right now. So if they don't want to go into that second apron, they got nothing left to do. Maybe a minor league deal or a really small deal for a first baseman. And this comes on the heels of they're going to do something really big. Remember like a week ago, which may still happen, I guess. It may still happen, but he's going along and doing the work with the money he has. That's what I read with the Sung-mun Song deal as well. You're getting a player, that in both King and Song's place, you're buying upside, and you're doing so at a reasonable price. And 2027 happens when 2027 happens. That's always been AJ Preller's motto.
Yeah, worry about the future when the future gets here, I think, has been the undercurrent of the approach for a long time now. I don't think either one of these other moves precludes them from making a blockbustery splash, because I think even when that was floated as something that was in the works or something they were trying to do, the built-in expectation was it doesn't mean they're not competing. It just means they're reshaping the roster in a way to keep the ownership group happy from a financial perspective, right? So I think this is still the attempt to have the cake and eat it too. As far as Song goes, the evaluations on him are tricky because he's a true late bloomer coming out of the KBO. I was looking back at the WRC plus numbers he was putting up. He was below league average between his age 22 and age 26 seasons before unlocking power and speed the last 2 years. It was basically just like all hit tool and not much else. The defensive scouting reports are all over the infield but shortstop, so first, second, third, all in play. He's a lefty bat, so he gives him some versatility, but that sounds a lot like a cheaper version of Jake Cronenworth if it's all good, maybe with a little more speed. And then, if we can't figure out like why he previously lagged so much, it's just hard to like take these numbers that he's been putting up these last 2 years and say, this is all translating. This all works against big league pitching right away, at least. I mean, I think there could be some kind of learning curve here. And I think most scouts are going to point you more towards a utility role as opposed to a regular sort of role for Song.
And I think it's fine. It is, there's a little bit more there to Song, that the comp that keeps showing up is Hae-Seong Kim. I did a under 30 strikeouts and walks comp in Korea, and Hae-Seong Kim is the other guy that comes up like multiple times. Song's on there multiple times, and Hae-Seong Kim. But the problem is that Hae-Seong Kim never really showed the home run power that Song had last year. Or even the last 2 years, ISO from Sung-mun Song has been a lot better than Hae-Seong Kim ever put up. So I do think there is more power upside here. There's more chance of a regular here. And it does make you wonder, is Cronenworth gone? And though I don't think Cronenworth's contract is technically underwater in terms of projected outcomes and stuff, I don't think that Jake Cronenworth would get a 5-year, $60 million contract if he's on the open market this year. So if you want to say that he's theoretically not underwater, he's probably practically underwater a little bit. And so, do they have to pay down some of it and attach a prospect to get rid of him? And is that the greatest thing to do when your first baseman right now, other than Cronenworth, is Sheets? I think there's a chance that this is just how the Padres go to work. They've got Cronenworth, they've got Sheets, they've got Song, and it's basically 3 guys for 2 positions. Sheets can DH too. Maybe they get some interesting Sheets Ian, like kind of minor league or small deal guys that they can bring into spring training. They also sent, they also went and watched Luis Campusano. That's what his new manager did, in winter ball. So there's some, wonder of what his role is on this team. But now they have Nick Pivetta, Michael King, Joe Musgrove. That's a good front 3 at least in the second half of the season if they're all healthy. And for this is probably a bottom half of the league back end of the rotation, if not like bottom 5 in the league, but we're back in the rotation with Randy Vasquez and JP Sears. But they've got Kyle Hart and they signed Tristan McKenzie to a minor league deal, and you could see them just going to battle like this and not having the best back end of a rotation.
Right. They have a great bullpen, so they don't need it. Like they can get away with 4-inning starts from the back of the rotation for a little while. And who knows? I mean, McKenzie's the kind of move that because of injuries, it was easy to sort of forget about him. And that was the path that Seth Lugo took to kind of reestablishing his value in the San Diego rotation a few years ago. Maybe Tristan McKenzie can pull something similar. He's a lot younger than Lugo was when Lugo did it. McKenzie's only 28. So if he's actually healthy, maybe there's a useful number 4, number 5 starter type there.
I think that's the main thing. It's just like I don't know when we've seen McKenzie healthy. I think there have been underlying issues that have dogged him his whole career, and you can just see it in the fastball velocity. It's been all over the place. And if McKenzie comes back to spring and he's throwing really hard, I would pay attention. And I would bet you another minor league signing for a starting pitcher for them is super easy. And if they do get the okay to go a little bit over the next apron, then maybe a $10 million, 4th starter type. Like Tyler Mahle would probably love to pitch in San Diego.
Yeah, that's the thing they've got working for them. Anybody that would be on a pillow deal would be very interested in pitching there. You got Ruben Niebla, you got a ballpark that's generally very kind to pitchers more often than not. So those things work in the Padres' favor.
Hold on real quick, though. Like, let's go into fantasy value. Sung-mun Song. What are you doing? Is this like a draft and hold player for now? Would you spend like a 15-team bench pick on him just to be like, hey, what if he's the starter and he's like a 15-15 starter, with second and third eligibility? That's interesting.
Yeah, I think in a 15-team, 30-round draft, he's still one of your bench guys to start the year. He's an easy cut if you don't like what you see. If you're going to use the Hyesung Kim, but the Hyesung Kim situation, think about how much deeper the Dodgers depth chart is than the Padres like right now. So you could look at Kim and say, well, Kim struck out a lot more than he did when he was in Korea, like a lot more as a part-time guy where they're picking spots for him. Yeah, but if the Dodgers were more desperate for someone to play, he would have been a good enough defender and played more, and maybe he would have struck out a little bit less playing more. So I could see, 300, 350 plate appearance season being that's like okay and useful in a deep league. And in draft and hold, you're going to keep that all year, and maybe you'll pick your spots with him. In a regular league with moves, you're just going to cut him if you're not happy with what you see. So
if he's
that's
not
fine.
Playing every day,
yeah, so you take that chance.
It's a deep league thing. It's not a 10 or 12 team thing until he's there. You can wait to see he's playing every day, and then you're
right.
Dropping somebody. Or
the King price, I think, can only go up. I looked at the last 10 days of ADP over at the NFBC. Pick 151, and that puts him behind Pablo Lopez, Jacob Mizorowski, Ryan Pepio, Gavin Williams. There's things I like about all of those guys, but you should be able to pencil Michael King into like I don't know, what tier, like probably the Fromber Nick Pivetta cluster. That's inside the top 100 overall, but I think there's a case for King to be up there.
I mean, the health risk is still real. I take him over Gavin Williams and Pablo Lopez because they have health risks as well. I don't think people fully appreciate Gavin Williams' health risk. And then I'd still take some of those names over him. Mizorowski, I think it's tough. I mean, that whole hype group is really tough for me because I just want that upside. But I could see just being like, if you're risk averse, take King over the hype guys. And then if you are doing that, then King sneaks into the top 25 or so.
Right. Then he starts to show up next to, I don't know, Brandon Woodruff, Kevin Gossman, Sonny Gray, some of the older guys that also have, at least two of those guys have some injury risk. Tyler Glasnow's in that cluster too. I could see that being the Michael King ADP going forward now that we know he's back in a familiar place where he's had a lot of success with the Padres. Let's get to a trade. Willson Contreras is a member of the Red Sox now, Eno. How about that for a thing that I don't think either one of us would have predicted? If you'd been given 5 trade destinations for Willson Contreras to land on this offseason, would the Red Sox have been in that 5?
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe like the last team in, but they wouldn't have been the this makes a ton of sense team, because we talked about possible trade scenarios. I think Pittsburgh is where we were trying to send Willson Contreras when we last had a conversation
and San
about
Francisco,
him.
I think at one point, but
yeah,
the difficulty with the Red Sox is that there is a bit of a crowd. He's entering a bit of a crowd there. He's obviously going to play. Do you know where he ranks among hitters in the last 3 years among qualified hitters?
By a WRC plus?
Yes.
Among qualified hitters, I'm going to say 35th.
In the last 3 years, he ranks 23rd among all major league hitters over the last 3 seasons. I think, this is a great bat ad because he's not even. Do you think he's not expected to be the best hitter on the Red Sox? And you've got a top 30 hitter here that's joining them, and it's not even that big of a deal. I think one thing that the Red Sox seem to prioritize is that roster flexibility and financial flexibility, because Willson Contreras, with the money that changed hands and how that happened, he's basically a 2-year, $36 million signing for them, and I don't think that the prospects they gave up are such that that contract represents a bunch of surplus value, but he is something they thought they needed, and he does join in a bit of a crew. That's why we didn't maybe think it was going to happen this way, but he's definitely the first baseman for me. And Masataka Yoshida and Tristan Casas get to figure things out. There's more offseason for Yoshida to be traded, and there's an option for Casas, and so he could end up in the minors, basically maybe rehabbing, proving his shoulder is good, and waiting for some sort of opportunity to arise.
Right. I mean, there's an opportunity to buy the dip on Casas in these next couple of weeks for draft and holds, because something's going to change. Either he will be traded, Yoshida will be traded, or DFA. The depth chart's not going to look exactly like it does right now once we get even to the start of spring training, or especially by opening day. I mean, there's always the possibility, I haven't seen the Red Sox at least rule it out publicly, that Contreras could catch some, even if he's going to be mostly a first base DH type at this point. So that's kind of lingering in the back of my mind as something that could help him accrue some value. But I just think this is great because it's probably the best hitter park he's played in so far. I mean, as a righty, you'd rather be a righty at Fenway than a righty at Wrigley or Busch Stadium, right? So I do think this could be one more level for Contreras as a hitter. Like, if you didn't think 2025 was sustainable had he stayed with the Cards, it's probably more likely he can put those numbers up again in 2026. This is a guy whose OPS was 72 points higher on the road last season, and kind of oddly hit 15 of his 20 home runs against same-handed pitching. So some oddities in that 2025 line from Willson Contreras, whose fit in St. Louis always seemed weird to me. Nothing about that fit made sense.
And, Fangraphs Depth Charts has a 25 homer projection for him. That would be the most ever. And so I think that it's on that same wavelength with you. Word of caution for those that use, there's a site called Baseball Trade Values where you can kind of plug in the trade and it spits out, oh, this is an overpay or whatever. That site said that this was an overpay of like $20 million by the Red Sox. And I don't see it, man. And like, I'm trying to figure it out because it says that Willson Contreras is $14 million underwater. And I'm just like, I do know that the Cardinals paid some money in this deal. They gave $8 million to the Red Sox. So they did pay for slightly better prospects, but so that does suggest that it may be close to underwater. What I would suggest is that it's right about the right value. And one of the things that happens is that your model's only as good as your inputs. And so if they're saying that Willson Contreras was $15 million underwater, I'm assuming actually that they're using Steamer projections, and Steamer projections has him with 470 plate appearances and being under a 1.5 win player. In which case, if you do believe that, then he might be underwater. But Willson Contreras has basically been a 3-win player for 5 straight seasons. So I think that would be way too much of a drop in value for him. I don't understand that. And then I think that some people are still using old dollars per wins. I think we're past $11 million a win. So for me, and I know that people don't even like the structure of dollars per win anymore. And I have an ear for that because there are times when dollars per win doesn't really work that well for relievers. We know that it's a separate little market, and whether or not that market is inefficient or whatever you want to feel about it, that's fine. But it's a fact that that relief pitchers have a totally different dollar per WAR figure than the rest of the market. And we see too many trades that Baseball Trade Values say, oh, this is a total overpay or, whatever. But the market did that, and it's not like the Red Sox are, idiots or whatever, So, I think that some of the underlying parts of those models are missing the overall. And even within the dollars per WAR structure, I think this is a fine deal. They're getting exactly what I think they're going to get exactly what they paid for, maybe a little bit more from Willson Contreras. And they gave up prospects that are pretty far away and have really high bust percentages on them. And I think valuing them the way that they did in the value calculator assigns them too much value. For an example, the pitchers that the Red Sox have traded away to the Cardinals, they are okay pitchers. We're talking about Richard Fitz and Hunter Dobbins in particular. But one thing stands out between Hunter Dobbins and Richard Fitz, which is the fastballs aren't great. They're not great. They get below average whiff rates. They a lot of the guys they sent over don't have great fastball ratings among prospect guys. Dobbins and Fitz don't have great fastball stuff plus. And so, I think that the Red Sox were like, hey, we've developed a glut of pitching, through our development process. And these are the worst fastballs in the group. And we're going to use these to get what we need elsewhere without having to put, $150 million for 5 years down for Pete Alonso.
Right. And I think they got impact. They didn't really hurt themselves in the next year or two. And maybe Dobbins and Fitz both end up as high leverage relievers. In that case, the Cardinals are happy to have some very cost controlled guys for a long time in that regard. But I think as 2026 goes, you're looking at both of them as starters with opportunities to chew up a lot of innings. I mean, that depth chart looks better today than it did a month or so ago. But if you have a bad fastball and you came from an organization that has some ideas about what to do to work around that, we saw them really cut that usage. Geez, was that 2024 now? Time is flying by again. The Red Sox are not an organization, developmentally speaking, they're going to take a pitcher and just try nothing with them. Right. So you just wonder, what's left to try? And then, of course, with Chaim Bloom now running things in St. Louis. How Raysian will they be, and how different is that from what the Red Sox have tried? So I'm intrigued by the darts that the Cardinals get because of opportunity, but I can understand why the Red Sox, based on not only just the surplus, but also their biggest flaw, were willing to move those players.
The Cardinals get to offer those pitchers opportunity, like you mentioned, and that is so huge here, where one of the things that turns a guy from a reliever, from a prospect into a starter is just letting him figure it out at the major league level, letting him figure out how he's going to get outs, letting him, it's actually kind of amazing that Clark Schmidt got as many chances as he did in the Yankees rotation to figure it out. You know what I mean? Because he could have easily have ended up somewhere else after a deal if he hadn't found a little bit of success as early as he did. I do wonder if there's an arbitrage opportunity here on the Red Sox a little bit. Right now it says Patrick Sandoval and Cutter Crawford as the 4th and 5th guys on the Boston rotation at Fangraphs on the depth chart. And that's going to feed projections. That's going to feed rankings. That's going to feed a lot of people as they pick in these early seasons. And I just can't help but look past those guys and say, oh, Connolly early, Peyton Tolley, and Johan Oviedo, who they just traded for, they're all behind Patrick Sandoval and Cutter Crawford. Like, I'm not sure that's true. That I don't know what's going to happen there, but Cutter Crawford, I think, could easily be in the pen. And he's also returning from injury. So I think there's a little bit of gray area there.
I think they believe there's something they can change about Sandoval, and that's why they signed him the 2-year deal coming off TJ in the first place. So in my mental depth chart for the Red Sox, I'm definitely pushing Crawford more into that bridge bucket, the first guy out of the pen when a starter goes short, and looking more towards Tolley and Early for the ceiling. But I do think they're a little more serious about Patrick Sandoval than the average person is looking at their depth chart, just based on when they signed him, what they signed him for, and how they've put this roster together. St. Louis, I think, is at least clearing things up in their position player group, where you can be even more excited about Alec Burleson. Like, if you were a believer in Alec Burleson coming out of 2025, you got to be pretty happy that Willson Contreras isn't there anymore, because now this guy had really no business being in the outfield anymore. I think he played 41 games in left last year, 34 in right. I think now it's going to be maybe triple digits at first base and the rest at DH for Burleson if he hits as expected again in 2026.
Yeah, I think you can get pre-excited too on some other guys just reading the tea leaves and how the Cardinals have been working. I think you can get kind of pre-excited on Nolan Gorman. And maybe even JJ Weatherholt. I think that Jordan Walker may get a full season. Another full season of burn. Is Nolan Arenado going to be a Cardinal on opening day? Is Lars Nootbaar?
Right. Man, they might not be done.
I don't think they're necessarily done. This feels like the beginning of a bit of a fire sale, and there's already been a Nolan Arenado to the Angels rumor, which it just chef's kiss, if you ask me. The rotation obviously is where you want to be shopping. And I think Victor Scott has ended up as my outfield 5 and outfield 6 in both drafts and draft and holds I've done so far, because I've felt a little steals light. But I think he's just got full year burn. I don't think they're going to take him out of that role, even if he struggles a little bit. But the rotation, Andre Palante, are we sure he's in?
No,
Kyle Leahy,
I don't think so.
I'm not even sure he's in. Kyle Leahy's listed as the 5 right now. I don't know about that. I will give Mike McGreevy, Matthew Liberatore, and Dustin May lock solid rotation spots. And then you get the Palante, Leahy, Fitz, Dobbins group. And Quinn Matthews, who's on the mend. So there's a little bit of an injury thing. I think that's easily, you say, he's got options. He's coming back from injury. He's in the minors to start the year. But Dobbins and Fitz, to some extent, when you make trades like this, I feel like there is some pressure to be like, hey, these are the guys we got. And if that's over Palante, who's been good in the pen, or maybe the Padres want Palante, you know what I mean? Just a better fifth starter. I don't think they wouldn't trade Andre Palante either. So I think Fitz and Dobbins are interesting pickups. Matthew Liberatore is actually my favorite of the bunch because he's going in like the 30th round. And I think he's at least somebody you want to start half the time. So there's definitely some opportunity there in the Cardinals rotation.
The Cardinals right now, looking at the last 10 days for ADP, barely have two players inside the top 200 overall. Burleson and Ivan Herrera, who's UT only. And I think the expectation is Herrera is going to catch some in 2026. He had surgery to have bone spurs removed from his throwing elbow, but he's not a full-time catcher. So he's going to start qualifying somewhere. He's also a little bit safer from a playing time perspective in a Cards world that doesn't have Willson Contreras as a part of it anymore, right? So the pieces are starting to clarify a little bit. I'm with you on Weatherholt being kind of a nice undervalued option if you want to take a flyer on a soon-to-debut, high-quality, maybe possible star, big leaguer. Weatherholt is going to have a spot to call his own sooner rather than later. He's not going inside the top 200 either, so it's a cheap dart to throw, and as we alluded to before, there's still probably a few more players coming off this depth chart. Brendan Donovan's name comes up in trade rumors and reports all the time. So
right, that's what I was saying. Get pre-excited about Gorman. Like maybe buy Gorman before Donovan gets traded because, right now it looks like Gorman's a halftime player. But, once you re-rack this and you're rebuilding, I think you might want to stick Burleson at first, play him as much as possible. Take Gorman at second, play him as much as possible. You're almost playing them as much as possible to trade them, maybe. Depending on where you think your window is. But they're young players that could reach another level and you're determined you want to keep them. So Walker, Gorman, Scott, Burleson, I think they're just trading. They're playing every day.
Let's keep it rolling. Tons of moves happening. Here's a 3-team deal. Pirates, Astros, and Rays getting together on one. I'm sure Pirates fans at first, when they heard there was a deal with the Rays, got a little bit nervous. And then when the Astros got involved, maybe they felt better. Maybe they felt worse. I don't think trading with the Astros has gone particularly well for the Pirates in recent years either. But I think the Pirates actually did well in all of this. They end up with Brandon Lau, Jake Mangum, and Mason Montgomery. The Rays ended up with Jacob Melton and Anderson Brito. And the Astros got Mike Burrows. So from the Pirates' perspective first, clearly a better team now in 2026. Burrows, I think, has had some injuries, looks like an interesting, more like back-end type starter. The Pirates have good starting pitching depth. They needed a bat, they needed power, and they got that. Brandon Lau absolutely fills a need, even though it's the last year of his contract. And then you get Mangum on top of that, just a good defensive outfielder, maybe more of a bench guy, and a really interesting reliever in Mason Montgomery that should help the pen right away. So I guess, is there anybody you see losing playing time with Lau's arrival, or were they so light in terms of corner outfield options? Because my expectation is he's playing a corner outfield spot. He's not playing second base for Pittsburgh because they've got a million second basemen. Did anyone actually lose here, or is this kind of a clear win-win, smart sort of trade for the Pirates?
I mean, you have Nick Gonzalez, Nick York, and Jared Triolo, vying for time at two positions. And I think shortstop is, will Connor Griffin start opening day? That's the big deal. If he doesn't, then I guess you can stick Nick Gonzalez at short for a little bit. But I'd be tired of that situation if I was running the Pirates. I'd just be like, let's just put Connor Griffin at short and let's start building a real team here. And so I think it's fine to have Nick Gonzalez, Nick York, and Jared Triolo kind of fighting for two positions and maybe even one position because they're still rumored in on Okamoto, the third baseman coming from Japan. And they said that they want to add another bat. So, I also don't think that Nick Gonzalez, Nick York, and Jared Triolo are so good that we need to bemoan their loss of time. I could see Brandon Lau playing second, though, because Jake Mangum he's flawed. And Keith Law pointed out that he wished that the Pirates hadn't acquired this player because he's not really an above average everyday player, probably, because he doesn't really hit the ball hard. And what he really does is make contact, but doesn't make enough contact and get on base enough to use his wheels to kind of get to second and get to third will be the big question. But I think no matter what, he's better than the Jack Sawinski plan out there. And he also gives them some redundancy if Josh Nixon Garcia doesn't work out. And so Magnum is just like, he's about raising the floor out there in the outfield, which was pretty low. And I think Brandon Lau plays second base actually for them, second base DH. And that means that Gonzalez, York, and Triolo right now are fighting for third, and they may end up just being the utility men for the squad, being, basically the bench for the squad if they add another bat.
They do have the opportunity to just see what else comes to them in free agency or trade before committing to any particular spot for Lau.
Because those guys can play a lot of different places. Chirillo played all over the place. He's kind of a fun draft and hold, 5-position guy, but he did just take a hit. I don't know. Like, my odds that Jared Chirillo, who is right now the starting third baseman on the depth charts over there, that starts the season as the starting third baseman, I think they're below 50%.
Very, very low. I think they'll find some kind of upgrade for that spot. But the other question I had for you with this return is Mason Montgomery. I mean, you got to give something to get something. So I'm not going to say the Rays trading him or including him in this trade means there's absolutely nothing there to like. This time last year, we looked at Montgomery as maybe a dart to throw if you were trying to speculate in the Rays bullpen. If something would have happened to Pete Fairbanks health-wise last year, Montgomery, this time a year ago, looked like he could be on the short list to possibly close. The start of his time in Tampa last season was a little bit bumpy, still put up 63 Ks in 46 innings. Where do we go from here? I mean, is he still someone that we really like as an electric, high-leverage sort of arm that can really help the Pirates in the late innings and maybe still hold some of that similar appeal? Because I don't think you're looking at Dennis Santana differently than me. Like, I look at Dennis Santana as a closer for now, but far from a long-term solution as a ninth inning guy in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think Mason Montgomery, Gregory Soto are excellent pickups in deep leagues. They're excellent darts to throw, even in maybe a 12-teamer in terms of you're going to take a last reliever and hope that, Dennis Santana loses the job before the end of spring training, which I think is possible. I think Santana's fine, but I think that teams are looking for more impact in that closer role than he brings to the table. So I like them both. And, Keith had an interesting point, which was that Mason Montgomery has been hit hard by lefties and he is a four-seam slider guy. But I'm looking at this and, Stuff Plus, by the way, loves Mason Montgomery. And it also says that Mason Montgomery's slider should be platoon neutral. And theoretically it should be, because it's a 90-mile-an-hour gyro slider that is about the most platoon neutral kind of pitch breaking pitch you can throw. And, as a lefty, has Mason Montgomery had problems with righties? Yes. Has that, have they hit his slider to a 556 tune last year? Yes. But is that set in stone? I don't think so. And there could be an opportunity here to, take the splitter back off the dust balls and put that back out there. I would think that, the Pirates have some idea that what they want to change here. And I'm betting on that stuff. And I still like Mason Montgomery a lot. I think this was a great trade for them because Brandon Lau is an impact hitter for them. They barely had any above average major league hitters last year. And Brandon Lau is at least going to be that. They're getting to finally put together a representative lineup. And now they have 3 options for closer, and they're not dependent on Dennis Santana to do all the heavy lifting. It did cost them Mike Burrows, and Mike Burrows, depending on how you sort of squint at what he's doing, my original read is that he's just a dude, and that the fastball, while it's 95 plus, it's not great shape, and it pretty much just lines up exactly with how his arm angle is, and that Mike Burrows doesn't have that much upside. But one thing I did notice is he dropped his arm angle from last year to this year, and he had a few fastballs, that were kind of cut ride fastballs. And I wonder if the Astros circled those fastballs and said, what if we move him away from his true four seam to more of a cut ride four seam, and maybe even drop his angle another two degrees, then he'll be a completely different pitcher than he was coming up, where he's a 50 degree arm angle over the top guy. And maybe we risk some of that changeup getting worse, but he's shown really good feel for the changeup. So if they have some sort of alteration to the fastball, an 87 mile an hour gyro slider with a really good changeup and an emerging fastball, they could make something out of Mike Burrows that he hasn't been so far. They could make something that is a true sort of more of a 2-3 than I think of him kind of as a 4-5.
Yeah, and we're talking about a guy that's closing in on 100 big league innings now for his career. 3.90 ERA, 125 WHIP, 99 Ks. Like it's a good starter kit to have, and the Astros certainly have a need with that expected loss of Framber Valdez. I did read that Dana Brown has been in touch with Valdez's camp, but I don't think that means a reunion's happening. It's not really the way the Jim Crane Astros have operated for the most part. Is you hit free agency, you're leaving. That's just the way it's going to go. You think about their depth chart right now: Hunter Brown, the clear ace. Christian Javier, a guy who was coming off TJ last year, probably. I think he gets the benefit of the doubt from me as far as just the stuff and the overall body of work. I'd be surprised if Javier came back again in 2026 and was below average across the board. Like, I just think there'll be something that comes back. Maybe the command gets a little bit better. Maybe the stuff ticks up a little bit. Maybe he tweaks the pitch mix. I just
maybe
can't
he throws
imagine
fewer pitches because he was throwing a bunch of pitches and stuff didn't like all of them.
Yeah, like there'll be some kind of tweak there, even if you have to look at him more as like a 3 or a 4. He's a big part of their plan. Like Spencer or Getty a bit. But I think you can pretty easily look at Burrows and say, yeah, they probably like him better than Jason Alexander, and maybe it's on a similar level to like an AJ Bluebaugh, but he should have a rotation spot to call his own in Houston.
I think that at the worst case, Burrows is boring and vanilla on a team that actually really needs that. Mm-hmm. Because you have, like you were alluding to, you got Hunter Brown and Christian Javier, and then you're like, oh, Fangraph says Lance McCullers for 14% of the innings.
That's not going to happen.
No. And I don't even know if he's a starter anymore. Even when he was in there, McCullers wasn't good, So to me, Mike Burrows is the 3 right now. And he's fully in the rotation, and it's a decent park. It's a decent division. He's going to get some wins. I think Burrows is in. I think Spencer Getty is the 4. And the 5 situation is McCullers, Weiss, Alexander, and Bluebaugh. And so do with that what you will. Arrighetti obviously is coming off of injury and wasn't as good as we'd hoped he'd be, but I think he showed enough that Arrighetti and Burrows they're a little bit more draft and hold type guys for me, where I'm like, they're innings on teams. They have roles. I like them. When you're talking about like 12 team, do you want to take Mike Burrows to be like one of your last starters in a 12 team? I feel like there'd be more exciting upside plays around there.
He may turn out to be. I haven't looked at the Astros schedule yet because it's only December. Sometimes you have a good early season schedule with 2 or 3 opportunities where you can get a free peek, see if something picks up, or you're just going for a streaming opportunity. So, maybe in a 12-teamer, that'd be the way I look at Burrows right now. But the Astros needed a starter, and they got one.
Yeah, and I think money-wise, you're right. They're getting close to being done. They're at 222. I really don't think they want to go into the luxury tax at 240. You almost always want to leave, if you're a competitive team, you want to leave $5 million, in between you and the luxury tax, so that you don't have to, pay for all your prospects. The guys you want to acquire the deadline, you don't want to have to pay all your prospects to pay their salaries down. If you look around their infield, they've got some redundancy with Correa, Paredes, and Walker. And I guess you could envision a trade happening there. But I think you can also just go to war with this group and just say sometimes Yordan Alvarez is going to play in the outfield, and and that's how you're going to clean this up. Do you think there's a high likelihood of another trade to clean that mess up a little bit?
I feel like if they make another deal in Houston, it's something with Christian Walker to free up some money, and then maybe it's signing something to backfill the money that was allocated to Walker. I don't know if they're going to get the talent back that they want in that deal.
Like theoretically, if you could, get rid of the Walker money and replace him with like Bellinger, it would be a better fit.
Yeah, that would fit the roster very well if they could pull that off.
I think you would DFA Jesus Sanchez to get off of that money. And I think you would try to get off of 80% of Walker's money. And then you would try to sign Bellinger to like a 3 and 100 or something. Like Bellinger's out there, supposedly asking for, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't see it.
No, I don't think anyone is comfortable with that many years on Bellinger at this point. The Rays side of this, Anderson Brito, really live arm, got up to, I believe, high A during the regular season, pitched in the fall league, has high-end reliever floor, but if he keeps developing as a starter, could be really interesting if it all clicks. A fun, high upside sort of lottery ticket for the Rays. Probably not a guy you're going to see contributing anytime in the early part of 2026, but Jacob Melton has some things that are really interesting, and I think the Rays' past success of finding other teams' bats and tweaking them a little bit and getting that extra tool unlocked in many cases, that's what makes Melton a little bit appealing to me right now. I think Keith, in the article you mentioned before, Keith Law referred to him as a Kevin Kiermaier starter kit. That's a compliment because Kevin Kiermaier was a phenomenal defensive center fielder. If you're a phenomenal defensive center fielder, you're going to play. You're going to get chances to turn those tools into more meaningful production at the plate. So I do think this is the player in the trade that we might look back on in 2 or 3 years and say, hey, they pulled off a little bit of a coup because Melton didn't look like a sure thing in Houston, and they turned him into a multi-year fixture in their lineup.
Yes, very much so. I agree with that. I think that this trade was about Melton. I think it was also about not paying Lau. That's, just part of the Rays thing. I think, slightly about Anderson Brito getting a guy with 30% strikeout rates in the minor leagues. It's exciting. He's like a 5'10" guy that might end up in the bullpen though. So there are already some questions about his command and his stature and his health. So it's not like you could say this was all about Anderson Brito. I think this trade was all about Jacob Melton. And what I like about it is that, he struck out 37% of the time in 78 plate appearances with a 15% swing strike rate. Like, none of that makes sense with his minor league numbers. Yes, maybe he doesn't have the greatest hit tool, but his swing strike rates in the minor leagues, Jacob Melton was swinging a strike around 10%. This year in AAA, he had an 8% swing strike rate. So I know we haven't figured out who's, strikeout rates, skyrocket in the major leagues and whose don't. But my rubric has been to sort of compare them using swinging strike and K percentage. And I think that Melton is going to be like a 24, 25, 26% strikeout rate guy. I don't think he's going to be a 30% strikeout rate guy. So that helps him a lot. And that changes things going forward because he has above average bat speed. He has elite sprint speed. It looks like he's going to be an elite defender in center. And he also gets to his power. Like, some of his hard hit rates are really good. He had a 56% hard hit rate in AAA. It's usually above 40%. And like, even right now, the projections for league average power with a 26% strikeout rate, and basically all this adding up to like a 90 WRC plus. That's the steamer one. The oopsie one is actually a little bit even more negative on him. I could see a situation where he this year is already like a 240 hitter with a low 300s OBP and like a 160, 170 ISO, which would make him like a 240 hitter that could hit a 170 ISO is, 18, 19, 20 homers. And the steals it's just whether he runs or not, but he could have 30 steals. So I'm not telling you to value him as a 240, 1530 guy, but that's in there.
Right. And I think it's interesting because I have an ongoing draft and hold where the trade happened during the draft. My pick came up in, I don't know, after round 30, I think round 32, round 33.
Yeah, you got Melton.
And I was like, all right, I'm going to get Melton. And then I looked at the profile and I was like, why wasn't I why wasn't he already in my queue? Because Houston had enough of a need where
I thought they might trade Jake Myers. And,
I shouldn't have needed a trade to the Rays to like get me to like Melton. Like I feel like I really botched that. I should have been ahead of the curve on Melton, and the Rays had to put the spotlight on him, which, the Rays are smart, so I just don't want to lose every foot race, Like I feel like I lose all the foot races. Probably bad news short term for Chandler Simpson, because if you think about Melton playing a lot, they're going to use him in center field. Mullins is going to move to a corner, and then Simpson becomes maybe like a fourth outfielder. Maybe he goes down to AAA. So if Chandler Simpson was one of your I need bags and I don't care what the rest of the category sort of plays, you may want to hold off on that plan, at least until we get more clarity on what the rest of the offseason brings. But I don't love it.
Here's the cold water. The cold water is Melton has options. Mullins doesn't. DeLuca doesn't.
But Simpson does, right? Simpson still has options.
No, DeLuca does. And Simpson has options.
DeLuca still has options?
So you're going to... Mullins, Fraley, and Lowe are going to be in the outfield. And so if that's true... no? What?
Just thinking about the DH spot and how that's going to work. You got a Ronda at the end. Yeah, okay. Yeah. They need a second baseman.
They're not done. Mullins and Fraley are going to make it just because that's how the Rays work. That if you don't have options on them, they want to keep them on the roster. They want to keep all their assets as long as possible. So that's why Fangraphs has Melton not playing that much this year, and DeLuca making the majors as Mullins' platoon partner as the righty in center field.
We're one move away still, man. All right. So the Rays got us again.
Like, they always want to compete. So they always they buy these short-term guys, and they're not, Mullins isn't like technically blocking Melton. I think Melton has a great spring training. Some of this might go out the window.
Yeah.
But, they also are, it's hard to tell what they're trying to do because they're always trying to do both things. For all the, and so we can maybe transition to the next one is they traded Shane Baz, in division.
Oh, dude. So I'm going to flip the narrative on its head right away, though. Yes, the Rays traded Shane Baz in division, but the Orioles traded Slater DeBrun and Caden Bodine and Michael Forret and Austin Overn and a competitive balance round A pick. They traded 5 different ways they could be wrong back. Like Shane Baz could be the best player of this trade by far in the long run. That's
have possible. To see it all the time, all those guys over and over again.
But I feel like if you're going to make a trade in division, you'd rather have multiple chances to kind of feel good about it later as opposed to the one bite at the apple, which I like this trade both directions because I think Baz still has untapped potential. I think Steinbrenner Field was unbelievably harsh on him last year. Nearly 2 homers per 9. It was a 1.79 homers per 9. Opposing hitters hit 271 with a 338 OBP and a 489 line against Baz in that park. He had a sub-4 ERA on the road. I think it was weird that he was better against lefties than righties last year. And man, probably in the long-term outcomes, if you said you got to decide who's going to win this trade in the long run, probably the Rays in the long run. But if you're the Orioles, you don't care that much about the long run because you don't necessarily need the guys you traded away. You needed pitching now that could be impact pitching in a playoff series. And I think Shane Baz could be that guy. So I think if you're an Orioles fan, you should be happy about this.
Yeah, the K-BB at home was good. It was just really that homer issue, and we know that homers are a big source of noise. You look at his pitches, you can look at these movement plots, and you could already see what the big problem was last year, which is he left a slider middle over and over again. The slider heat map right there that you're looking at for Shane Baz is just middle. He switched over to the cutter, and yes, he still gave up some homers on the cutter. And I won't pretend that last year was an amazing year. He still had a bit of a homer problem. But I also think that, we talked a little bit about, post-surgery realities and Baz trying to figure out who he was post-surgery. This is the most innings he's ever thrown, the most opportunities he had to fail and to win. So I think no matter what, he learned something this year. The one thing that worries me, I guess, a little bit is you see that knuckle curve, the heat map right there. It's like back foot to lefties. Stuff Plus thinks that the knuckle curve is better against lefties. And it's put in better position and better places against lefties than righties. The slider didn't work, and he moved to a cutter, and the cutter is superior by Stuff Plus and by results, and just theoretically, the cutter is superior against lefties and inferior against righties if you're throwing him as a righty. So, will he have a problem getting same-handed hitters out? And that's where you hope that the Orioles have maybe a plan for the slider. Maybe he's gonna, there's something they can do there with the slider, or maybe they just change up the mix. Maybe he throws some right on right changeups, and he becomes more of a wide mix. I don't know what the solution is, because the slider is the solution when you're a right on right and you need to get people out. And he kind of went away from that last year. So I do know that some of that his surgery impacted this. Coming back from surgery impacted his mechanics and impacted his mix, and he's not quite the guy that he was before the surgery, but he's still pretty exciting. And I want shares of Shane Baz this year, especially now that he's not pitching in that park.
I think we could save the rest of that return for more of a keeper or dynasty league conversation later on, just because I don't know if there's really a whole lot of immediate 2026 impact for us. And
they're also just like, there's such wild unknowns. Like, one of those guys hasn't even played in the pros. It's basically almost like trading a draft pick.
Right. 2 drafted last summer, and one with no experience professionally, one with very little. I think that's DeBrun and Bodine in some combo.
Yeah.
I forget which one off the top of my head. Either way, a lot of bites at the apple, and a branch from the Chris Archer trade tree that sprouted that will probably bear some fruit for a very, very long time. Like this one could go a couple of decades when it's all said and done, knowing the Rays and how they operate. We'll see how many of these guys they end up actually being right about. And maybe the best player is the competitive balance around a draft pick. Maybe it's a guy that's not even in pro ball yet.
Yeah. The wildest thing, though, was the beginning of my little mini rant there, was that the Rays still look, after all these trades, they look like they could be competitive. I wouldn't say that they don't look like a top 1 or 2 team in the AL East. That's a tough division. But after all these trades out of the rotation and everything, like Rasmussen, Pepio, Shane McClanahan, the Steven Matz deal makes more sense now. Because
they're going to start him, yeah. I saw the follow-up report on that. They're going to try to start him.
And now you have Ian Seymour and Joe Boyle as your 5-6. That's, as bad as the Padres 4-5-6 situation is, the Rays might have one of the better 4-5-6 situations in the big leagues. Just like, veteran guys, a crafty lefty with command, and like a huge stuff guy that could pop, So, the rotation seems like it's still an okay position. They traded out of the bullpen, but I like Jax to be the closer, and Uceda's a decent reliever, and Brian Baker is underrated. So that's actually that's not that's not bottom of the league bullpen. It's middle of the pack. And then the offense is, they do have Taylor Walls at second base right now. Their outfield is a little bit boring. I'm not that into Chandler Simpson as a baseball player. As a fantasy baseball player, I understand why we're interested, but as a real life baseball player, I think that outfield is probably one of the worst in the big leagues. Is that true? I've been a Josh Lowe defender.
It's one of the worst in the big leagues, but by projection, well, we can solve this one. What do you think that group is projected for?
Maybe they're like 20th or something.
Let's see. Rays. Oh, come on. There it is. They are not terrible. It's a 1.4 projected in left, 2.1 in center, 1.5 in right. It's not great.
Oh,
combined, that's going to be
better than I thought.
That's going to be like bottom 8, bottom 9, something like that. Yeah.
But they probably still have a couple more rabbits to pull out of the hat. Could they be an Okamoto team?
They could be anything. They could be a Ketel Marte trade partner, right? Like I think the
How much
teams
does
that
these trade if they traded for all those prospects to trade for Ketel Marte to put Ketel? I feel could that really be like one player that normally I'm like, oh, one player, but that one player with Caminero, Aranda, now you got like a great middle of the lineup. Low, you got 4 Yandy, you got 5 major league hitters, you got a Carson Williams, like like great prospect. You got Melton in center. Like if they do get Marte, I mean, I could. That would change my opinion of their next 2 years, 3 years radically.
I mean, I'm just talking out of my rear right now, but they're 19th in WAR projection, and that's with a 1.1 at second base. So if you swap, basically just give them 3.5 more WAR, because that's the difference on the same chart, then they would jump up to 40 WAR, and they'd be behind the Tigers and Brewers. They'd jump over the Rangers, Cubs, Twins, and Diamondbacks if they made that trade.
And they seem like they'd be pretty healthy long term still. And, yeah. I mean, and then Carson Williams would be the big, which way does he go? If Carson Williams is who, at one point, Zips projected and this was like 2-3 years ago, but it said that Carson Williams in this coming season would be a top 10 player in the big leagues.
Yeah, that'll pop sometimes when you're going off in like the mid levels of the minor leagues. That's the growth hack that you're looking for if you're trying to show up high on Zips projections.
I do get the the Rays are selling and they're not as exciting and they're trying to take a step back. But I think that they're always trying to do both things.
You just think about the Orioles clearly aggressively pushing some chips in, the Jays spending big, trying to get better, make that run back to the World Series. The Yankees still being the Yankees. Like there's 4 teams in that division. Usually it's 2 or 3 that are on the gas and spending and doing everything. It's all 4 of the other teams right now. So maybe that's the time when the Rays say, okay, we're going to just accumulate as much club control and depth. We'll get some non-40-man guys that we'll have for a long time, and we're just going to try and make our team 2 or 3 years from now a lot better while still trying to stay afloat right now. That it feels like they're always trying to play for now and later, but the balance of how much now and how much later fluctuates, and it's tipping more later than it usually does because of what the other 4 teams are all doing, as it probably should if you're going to operate that way.
I mean, I'm looking at the Orioles depth chart right now, and I'm like, wow, this is a much better team than the Rays.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's always going to look, and the Rays, the Brewers, the Guardians, those teams always look worse on paper than they actually are too.
Yeah.
Kind of just part of the way that they're made. One last topic before Hazel the Golden Doodle gets her holiday haircut, which I'm sure she's very excited about. She's not going to be happy with me at all. Apparently, she's very good at haircuts. She just, doesn't really want
you afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. She kind of looks at me like, "Yeah, you didn't have to do that." It's like, "No, we did. You need it." If you told me at the beginning of the offseason, Munetaka Murakami is going to be the last name on your rundown the day he signed, I'll say, well, clearly the news broke during the recording. That's the only way that would have happened. Nope, it just happened to get washed away by some other big signings and huge trades. Murakami ends up with the White Sox. 2 years, $34 million. Fewer years, fewer dollars. Now, the big thing here is that Murakami is young compared to a typical major league free agent, right? So time is actually on his side. And a 2-year deal means he hits free agency again going into age 28 season. So if he can dispel the concerns about him, which are contact related, right? Tons of power. We've seen that in Japan. It's 80 grade power, but it's a huge question about hit tool and being able to make enough contact to tap into that power in a way that is going to make him an above average big league player. Like, you've done the comps on Murakami before, and the more you've looked at it, I don't think it's gotten any better. So I think there's a lot here.
I did discover some things along the way, though.
Yeah. So what did you find digging more into Murakami in the last couple of weeks?
Well, we did this before, so if we put up the comp list right now, you'll have seen these names before. Joey Gallo, using zone contact for Murakami, which would be bottom 1 percentile in the big leagues, and then using max exit velo as basically a proxy for bat speed and power, that he would have been top 5, top 6% in the big leagues. You use those things, You create a comp list. Joey Gallo is on it. We talked about this before. Matt Wallner is on it. Those are the closest comps to him when you use those things. I did soften the plate appearance number to get Nick Kurtz on there. But Nick Kurtz has a 76.3% zone contact rate on Fangraphs for StatCast, and Munetaka Murakami had a 72.6 in Japan last year. So that's still 4 percentage points. That's still a pretty big difference. Another way of putting it is Nick Kurtz's comp list does not really have Murakami on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not a two-way street. That's a little bit of a concern.
At 76% for Nick Kurtz, you go below him a little bit to 74, and then you go up to 80 and you get Ohtani and stuff. Now, here's the weirdest thing. The in-zone contact rate on Fangraphs that's listed as StatCast is different than the in-zone contact rate on Savant. And the reason is Fangraphs doesn't count foul tips as whiffs, and Savant does. So if you use the Savant in-zone contact rate, possible comps that you could put on the list are Teoscar Hernandez at 74.8, Adolis Garcia at 75.2, Shohei Ohtani at 75.9. This is Baseball Savant's in-zone contact rate. Rafael Devers, 75.9. Jazz Chisholm, 76. I will point out, though, that each of these guys is basically 3 to 4 percentage points better than Murakami was in Japan.
Right.
So, I feel good about the list, and I feel like the list and our analysis on the show has been backed up now by the market. A two-year, $34 million deal is so far away from the 180 that we saw projected for him that this is the market saying, no, there's a lot of risk here. And I think part of it also is the shape of Murakami's career, because Murakami, yes, he's had, MVP seasons in Japan. He had a 56 homer season. Yes, that was 2022. And since that day, his strikeout rate has gone from 20.9% up to 30% in Japan. So it's going the wrong way. It feels like, there's a hole that's been uncovered. Kyle Glazer just, got in contact with me. He's like, I sat in on a bunch of his games in Japan, and that was my impression, was that there was a hole that had been figured out. He's also he sort of struggles with confidence sometimes and just gets into spirals. Very streaky hitter. The nice thing about him going to the White Sox, though, is if he's streaky bad, they might leave him in there to get to the streaky good. And I think that's probably, that type of risk was really hard for a team, even like the Padres, who could have maybe afforded this. Or maybe they can't.
Well, being wrong when you're a contending team and you're living in a luxury tax apron that your ownership group doesn't want you to be in.
Yeah,
that's the double whammy. You can't afford a mistake like that. The White Sox can afford a mistake. They could be absolutely wrong about Murakami, and no one's going to laugh at them because they're in a rebuild, and this is a gamble worth taking. I mean, if they can find a way to help him close up that hole and make him less deficient in zone, then we're going to be sitting here 2 years from now going, hey, Murakami's going to get the 4 or 5 extra years that he thought he was getting up front that people were projecting
later
him for.
On.
He's going to get that later. That could happen. I mean, is it the most likely outcome? No, but it's at least a possible outcome.
And also, I'm worried about the White Sox fit in another way, which is that part of the reads that I've heard from scouts is that they don't know about his plate approach, his plate discipline. Like, he's not swinging at the right pitches. And I'm sorry, the White Sox do not have a great track record when it comes to swinging at the right pitches. They've long had the worst chase rate in the big leagues.
Yeah. The thing we did get from the introductory press conference on Monday is that they also see him as a first baseman, so they're not going to try third base, which is smart.
Which affected his market too. That was part, like, he wasn't somebody that you could play at third.
Yeah, so I think that also probably worked in their favor. I mean, he's going to turn 26 in February, so it's his age 26 and 27 seasons. If you're going to take a chance on somebody with 80 power, this is the time to do it. And if it works, it's going to be fun. from just a simple business perspective, which people generally don't care about on the show, hey, you become a more popular franchise in Japan if this works, right? You're going to have some fans overseas. Not a bad thing to get extra eyeballs on your team because people here are not gravitating to the White Sox in their current form, right? So
you mentioned that the White Sox seem to be not caring too greatly about strikeout rates right now. They're kind of loading up on power.
Power without hit tool is like a thing that they see maybe as being an opportunity for them.
I mean, they still haven't made Roth,
right. Different kind of player. They're balancing it out. Well, hey, Chris Getz is probably looking for players like himself somewhere on the roster.
He is Getzian, man, my job. And Kyle Teal, I think, actually has some good field to hit, and Edgar Guerrero. So, there's some there, but you're going to have Colson Montgomery in the lineup, 29%. You're going to have projected 29% by Steamer. You're going to have Luis Robert Jr., 28% projected by Steamer. I don't have a Steamer projection for Okamoto, but I would actually guess it's like a 35 or something for him. They even picked up Everson Pereira, who strikes out a lot. Derek Hill strikes out a lot. So there are going to be some strikeouts on this team.
Yeah, I think the bigger question with the White Sox in terms of player development on the position player side in particular is, can they make hitters better? Because previous forays into that in the recent versions of this front office have been lacking, right? They just haven't been able to take average position players and make them better, or below average guys and make them average. That's generally been a shortcoming of the org. And now with guys like Mydroth, I think could be really interesting. From a real life perspective and from an OBP fantasy league perspective. Can they take Brooks Baldwin and take his power speed combo and make him more of like a league average or slightly better than league average guy? Like, if they can do stuff like that, that's good for them long term. They need to be able to do some things like that to kind of round out the roster over time.
Yeah, and one final thought on this was, while we were poking around, park factors are so weird. I just have these moments where I'm like, that place is a hitter's park, right? And then I look and I'm like, Chicago, the Cell is the 20th best hitter's park right now by StatCast Park Factors. And I'm like, I just don't understand this, because when I was growing up, it was the same park, right? Like, as a kid, I remember being like, that's a home run hitting park. And then you looked at what, 2010 or something? Or 2008?
I went back 15 years ago to the 3-year rolling average on StatCast. And by 3-year rolling StatCast Park Factors, rate field, which at that point was, I don't know, what did they call it back then? Doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah,
129.
It was guaranteed. That was American. No, American Families. That's
the Cell, U.S. Cellular Field. That's right. 129 for the home run park factor, number one in baseball. So that was from 2008 to 2010 for the 3-year rolling park factors. It was more homer friendly than Cincinnati, than that version of Arlington's ballpark, than Camden Yards at that time, than Citizens Bank Park. That one's weirder to me than most, because, well, remember, like, humidors. Humidors are a bigger part of the game now than they were back then.
Everything is much more tightly aligned.
Right, because even Chase Field. Remember Chase Field 10 years ago, pre-humidor? Very different ballpark than it is right now.
And we're monitoring the situation in Texas, where it's a new park, so we're not going years back, but it's just become more pitching friendly as it has existed, which is just super strange. So, I mean, there's I think we can do park factors better. I prefer park factors that are sort of like, how do balls that go 95 miles an hour? But there is a problem there that we publicly don't have batted ball spin. So to do a perfect park factor, what you would want to do is have batted ball spin, perfectly model out everything, even the wind, right? And then say, this is what a neutral ball would do. A 95 mile an hour, 20-degree launch angle ball, whatever. That's, and then you take that ball and you put it into each park, and then you sort of redo it. They do have that on StatCast, but I don't think it's as prevalent as it should be. But I think we can improve park factors still, is all I'm saying.
I do think snapshots in time of park factors, though, leave us in positions to like think about bigger changes. Like, I forgot about the introduction of more humidors around the league. That's part of the explanation for sure. And it just changes your perception of the park because you had years of watching games there and seeing players go in there and leave and their performance fluctuating.
I literally thought it was a hitter's park until I looked it up today. I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit that because I should be checking these all the time, but like I was embarrassed to see where it was.
It's okay. You've righted your wrongs. It's all good.
I was going to say Murakami lands in a good park. Maybe
we'll have some.
Who knows?
I have more questions about how good they are at developing hitters and making hitters better.
Right.
To me, it's just an open question. Like this regime,
Right.
We'll see if they can do it or not. We're going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can join our Discord. Be sure to like this video, especially if you made it all the way to the end. We certainly appreciate that. I know there's some more minor moves and other news we didn't get to today because this episode got really long with big news. So we'll catch up on that after the holidays. Hope everybody out there has a safe and happy holiday season. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.